Germany was broken, not just weakened, destroyed. By 1918, after World War I, the German Empire had collapsed. The economy followed. Factories closed. Jobs vanished. Savings disappeared. The middle class was wiped out. Families who had worked their whole lives suddenly found themselves destitute. Then came the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was forced to pay massive reparations to the Allied powers. Money was scarce, so the government printed more. Hyperinflation exploded. By 1923, prices doubled daily. People carried wheelbarrows of cash just to buy bread. Savings vanished overnight. The middle class watched their life's work turn to dust. Even when hyperinflation ended, stability was short-lived. The global Great Depression hit in 1929. Banks failed. Factories shut down again. Unemployment soared past 6 million. Poverty was widespread. Trust in the government collapsed. Desperation created fertile ground for a new political force, the Nazis. 1933. Hitler takes power. Adolf Hitler became chancellor in 1933. He promised hope, jobs, stability, and national pride. But the economy he inherited was hopeless. Millions unemployed. Industry collapsed. Foreign loans had dried up. The Nazis didn't wait for markets to recover. They intervened directly. This was not a free market revival. It was state-driven reconstruction. Almost immediately, the government launched public works programs. Roads, bridges, railways, and public buildings were built. Millions found work. The Autobahn became a symbol of progress. Next, military expansion began. Factories started producing weapons, tanks, and aircraft. Employment soared again. Statistically, the Nazis manipulated numbers. Women were pushed out of the workforce. Jews were excluded from employment data. Young men were drafted into the military. On paper, unemployment disappeared almost overnight. To the average German, this looked like a miracle. But was it real or just an illusion? The engine behind the miracle: government spending. The Nazi economy ran on one principle: spend aggressively, but Germany didn't have the money, so they created hidden debt. One tool was Mefo bills, promissory notes that allowed the government to pay companies without cash. Companies could redeem them later. This allowed massive public spending, avoided immediate inflation, and hid the true size of debt. Wages were fixed, prices regulated, imports restricted. Private companies still existed, but under strict government direction. The government decided what to produce, how much to produce, and where resources went. Productivity wasn't driven by innovation. It was driven by control. Economic output surged, but it was artificially engineered. Is growth real if it relies entirely on government spending and artificial demand? Autarky. Germany's push for self-sufficiency. Germany lacked vital resources: oil, rubber, and metals. To prepare for war, the Nazis pursued autarky, economic self-sufficiency. They invested heavily in synthetic fuel, artificial rubber, domestic substitutes for critical raw materials. This reduced dependence on imports but came at a high cost. Production was expensive and inefficient. The economy was optimized not for profit, but for military readiness. The illusion of prosperity. By the late 1930s, Germany looked strong. Unemployment was down. Industrial production was rising. Infrastructure expanded rapidly. To most Germans, it felt miraculous. Jobs were back. Roads were being built. Factories hummed. National pride surged. But beneath the surface, the system was fragile. Growth relied heavily on hidden debt, militarization, and strict state control. Consumer goods remained limited. People had jobs, but fewer choices. More control, less freedom. The miracle was real in appearance, but illusionary in essence. The role of war. The Nazi economic system had a built-in endpoint. War. Why? Because the growth engine depended on military expansion, resource acquisition, forced labor. Without conquest, Germany could not sustain its economy. In 1939, World War II began. Initially, conquest temporarily solved economic pressures. Conquered territories provided resources, labor, and production capacity. But war also brought destruction. Factories were bombed, supply chains collapsed, and infrastructure suffered heavy damage. By 1945, Germany was once again in ruins. The true cost of the miracle. Was it really a miracle? In the short term, yes. Unemployment fell rapidly. Industry recovered. National pride surged. In the long term, no. Growth depended on debt, control, and militarization. Living standards didn't rise proportionally. Consumer choice was limited. The system was fragile and unsustainable. The Nazi economic miracle solved immediate problems, but created long-term catastrophe. Public works and industrial mobilization. The backbone of the miracle was massive government spending on infrastructure. The Autobahn wasn't just a highway, it was a job creation machine. Bridges, schools, and factories were built. Millions of Germans found work in construction and manufacturing. Industry was also mobilized for rearmament. Aircraft factories, tank plants, and weapons manufacturers ran at full capacity. Employment increased dramatically. Germany had the appearance of full economic recovery. Yet, much of this growth was not market-driven. It depended on state planning and massive injections of debt. How long can such a system sustain itself without a war to justify production? Mefo bills and hidden debt. Germany's spending was financed in part through Mefo bills, a secret financial instrument. These promissory notes allowed companies to be paid without cash, postponing the visible cost of government expenditure. This mechanism enabled massive investment, prevented immediate inflation, hid the real debt from the public. It was brilliant in the short term, dangerous in the long term. Eventually, these debts would come due, creating a fiscal time bomb. Labor and statistical manipulation. Unemployment figures were manipulated. Women were pushed out of jobs. Jews were excluded from official statistics. Young men were drafted into the military. On paper, Germany was fully employed. In reality, millions of workers were either removed or hidden from the numbers. The miracle was partly propaganda, making the economy look healthier than it was. Autarky and resource strategy. Germany lacked crucial resources. Oil, rubber, and metals were imported, leaving the country vulnerable. To address this, the Nazis pursued autarky, self-sufficiency in essential materials. They created synthetic fuels, rubber substitutes, and domestic alternatives for metals. This strategy reduced reliance on imports, but was costly and inefficient. The economy was increasingly directed toward war preparation, not consumer welfare. The fragility of the system. By the late 1930s, Germany looked prosperous. Infrastructure projects were completed, industry was humming, jobs were plentiful. Yet, the system was unsustainable. Growth depended on debt, military expansion, controlled labor, limited consumer demand. Consumer goods were scarce. Living standards didn't match the numbers. The economy was fragile, artificial, and temporary. The cost and consequences. Ultimately, the Nazi economic miracle came with enormous costs. It depended on state intervention, hidden debt, militarization, propaganda. Short-term gain masked long-term instability. Once war began, the system was exposed. Factories were destroyed, infrastructure bombed, and resources depleted. By 1945, Germany was again in economic ruins. The takeaway: the Nazi economic miracle teaches a stark lesson. Rapid economic recovery can be achieved through aggressive state control, hidden debt, and militarization. But such growth is unsustainable. Economics is not just numbers, it's people, freedom, trust, stability. The apparent miracle of Germany's recovery came at the cost of liberty, security, and ultimately, human lives. Short-term miracles can mask long-term disasters. And history shows that when the illusion fades, the consequences are devastating. If you found this analysis eye-opening and want more deep, detailed breakdowns of history's most remarkable economic stories, make sure to subscribe, because understanding the past is the first step to predicting the future.